Thanks for joining us today for our next episode in the addiction series. So, just to touch on my childhood a little bit more, I spoke about the physical abuse and the mental abuse from my stepfather. Also, at the age of 7 or 8, I was sexually abused by a neighbor. So, those are the three abuses that I faced as a child. And, looking back now, I can see how that could have very well led to my addictive personality. I'm not saying that that is 100% the absolute cause, but I do see that it could potentially be one of the factors that attributed to my addiction. So at age 13, I got exposed to some family members a couple years older than me, as well as some upperclassmen at school smoking weed, smoking pot. And of course, I was very athletic, very fast. I played basketball, baseball, football, everything. Very coordinated. I loved playing team sports. So just to give you like an idea of my demeanor, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was very destructive as well. I hated my life. If I knew that I could have ran away and been okay, I would have done it. But got into smoking weed. I remember the first time was with a cousin of mine down on one of our family farms on my biological father's side. I actually met him when I was 12 years old and was told about him because I asked my mom and she came clean about it and told me the truth. Because of all the abuse from my stepfather, finally, it just didn't make any sense to me why I got treated one way and my siblings got treated another way. I don't want to make this topic about the child abuse as much, but I think it's important to give that background because I really do feel like that it contributed to my addiction. I started smoking weed with one of my cousins on my dad's side, and then there was a few people at school that did it. And like the first time I smoked, it didn't even do anything. Like I had no head change. But then the second time I smoked was with a guy from my basketball team over in his neighborhood. They had some skunk weed, and we was back in the park at nighttime, and I hit this joint, passed it around, didn't feel anything, hit it again, passed it, and about 10 seconds later, it was like somebody punched me in my face because my head actually went back. And it was like huge head change. And I was just like, what is going on? Like, wow. Complete shift in reality. So that was my first experience, with smoking weed. And that took me away from my reality. I hated my life. Smoking weed, smoking cigarettes gave me a different reality. So anything other than my true reality was, at the time, what felt like to me was a huge blessing. just a huge relief to take me away from my reality. At 14 years old, I started drinking. Started with beer, and that was again another case of stealing beer from an uncle. Me and my cousins would steal a couple beers out of the refrigerator, run out to the barnyard behind the barn, whatever, and we would just slam these beers. And we'd get a head change. And it was just exciting, at the time. By the time I was 14, I was on a very destructive path. At the time, I had no idea, that I was destructive. But anytime I got away from my stepdad, it was pretty much like someone had taken the Tasmanian devil out of his cage and released him into the wild. I just let loose, and I'd do anything. So here I am smoking cigarettes, smoking weed, drinking beer. I'd do pretty much anything. Thankfully, at that point in my life, that was all that I was exposed to, but that changed a few years later. I continued that behavior on all the way through high school. At about a junior in high school, I was at a party and some people had some meth. At the time, they called it crank. And I snorted a line of that and was up for, 24 hours, 48 hours or whatever. I didn't have any money. I couldn't afford to do those kind of drugs. I could barely afford to get, weed. And then like alcohol, I would go steal alcohol from gas stations. I'd put like a 40-ounce bottle in each one of my sleeves in my jacket and walk out the store. And like I was saying, I was an athlete, in my teenage years. I was very fast, very athletic. If I was going out the door and somebody tried to stop me, like, they weren't going to catch me. That was just the reality of it. So anytime I wanted beer, I would just steal it. So I didn't have to pay for that. And, other things I'd have to pay for. So we had people in the neighborhoods that would sell weed, and we could go buy a joint for $5. It got to a point like my friend would pick me up for school, and we'd stop by the weed man's house before school, buy a joint, and we'd smoke that on the way to school. After school, we'd go back by because we'd figure out a way to get another $5, get another joint. But when I was about 18, there was a family member who had a friend that just got out of prison for some drugs. And this guy gave us some cocaine one day. And me and my cousin started doing some coke. And this was like summertime of being 18 years old. So I was actually working a job roofing. It was a horrible job, but it was a way to make money. So we would work, doing the roofing job. And at this point, I actually lived with my cousin. After getting into fights with my dad, my biological dad, who I ended up living with for my junior and senior year of high school, over drugs, because one of my cousins told on me for about wrecking my car coming home at 3 o'clock in the morning high on coke. I almost flipped my car coming around a curb, not paying attention, and was going way too fast coming around a curb. So I was living with him. We were doing coke, just thinking we were just living the good life, the big life, 18 years old. Well, that summer came to an end. my cousin and his wife at the time, he got married really young, lost their house because of drugs and gambling problems. He was addicted to drugs, she was addicted to gambling. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Addiction, episode 2. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe and come back and join us again to continue the conversation in episode 3.